Hey, what's up, and welcome to this episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh.
My name is Sam, and I'm back in the saddle again.
Back
Just like the
in
Aerosmith
the
song.
saddle again.
That is
so this is
not
gonna
the right song.
That's a song. That is a song.
That's not the right one. I'm talking about the Aerosmith song. You probably sang some country song.
Oh yeah, that's like a way old country song. Like way old. I don't know how old it is.
Do you know who I've actually been listening to a little bit of country, and you know what I have enjoyed listening to?
Mm-mm.
Can you guess what country artist I may like?
Oh, Miranda Lambert. Who do you like?
I have no idea who that is. I have no idea. No, Dwight Yoakam. I've been listening to a lot of Dwight Yoakam.
Listen,
I really like him.
I love Dwight. That is a great song. That is a great just artist, and some of his songs are just haunting. He's so good.
Well, I'm new. I'm new to this world, but I've enjoyed listening to Dwight.
Yeah, I'll send you some recommendations. This is the first recording in my new office. How do you like it?
I know. So yeah, I'm back in the saddle again. One, you're brand new at your church, but this is also we're recording. So we record a little ahead. I'm sure most of our audience knows that. You kind of have to in the podcast world. And this is the first recording, not the first episode, but the first recording in 2024.
Yeah. So Happy New Year officially. I think we did it before, but that was a pre-planned New Year. Yeah.
Do you feel fake when you're like Merry Christmas and it's like October? Because we're recording it in October yeah, I do too. Yeah, I feel real fake.
I do, but it's part of the magic. It's part of the magic. I actually don't look this good. If you're watching on YouTube, I actually don't look quite this handsome in real life. But it's part of the magic of media. That's just what we do.
You know who else has magic?
Church teams.
Yeah. Well, it's not even magic. It's a thoughtful and careful resource that they've put together. They do church management software better than anyone else. And we love church teams. Mm-hmm. You guys know this who listen to the show. Boyd Pelly and his crew provide just an incredible resource for churches. So they do all sorts of things. Text to church. I really like their text to church system. I think it's really smooth, and it is something that is helpful to just about any size church. So you should check them out. You can go to est.church to get their offer. They've been making this offer to our listeners for quite some time. And I know some of you have been listening and you've been thinking, I need to do that. Now's the time. New year, new you. Go get you some church teams. You can go to est.church. You can also go to their website, of course, and see everything that they have to offer. But their pricing plans are great because they are scalable to your church, and they're priced accordingly. So small church, large church, they have it for you. They are the best in the business when it comes to church management software. So thank you, church teams, for sponsoring today's episode.
That is true. So we got an interesting topic today, something that a lot of churches are dealing with, and that is midweek services.
Yeah, and we'll just say Wednesday nights. You can say midweek. I know some churches do some Thursday nights, which is kind of cool. I'm certainly a fan. But historically, Wednesday nights has been the time when churches meet midweek. And the question, which is also the podcast episode title, is: are Wednesday nights dead, or are they your biggest opportunity? What do you think, Josh? Let's just like, we're going to talk about this, and there's nuance here, of course. There always is. But what do you say? Are they dead? Are they a big opportunity?
I don't know that they're dead. I do think that they are much more difficult than they used to be, and we're going to talk about this, but it's regionally factored in, so there's going to be some different factors there. Used to be, you can't have this conversation without mentioning the fact that used to be Wednesday nights were sort of sacred. School districts didn't plan games. There weren't events. There were even some schools that I am aware of let out a little early on Wednesdays because they were headed to youth group, that sort of stuff. And it was seen as just sort of, that's when you did that. Friday night was football, Thursday night was junior high football games, and Wednesday night was church. That's just not the case anymore. If you're in some districts, especially large districts, you can have all sorts of sporting events for teenagers. And So you've got all of that going. You've got sort of, if you live in suburbs, we've got some factors that we got to talk about there. So they're definitely under attack. I don't think they're dead, and they can be utilized, but maybe our touchdown, the goalpost, needs to move just a little bit on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. What do you think? Are they dead, or are they still kicking?
I'm going to agree with you on everything that you said, but I'm going to just put my own take on it. I'm going to be a little more on the positive side. I'm going to say that they are more of an opportunity for most churches, more of an opportunity than most realize. Let me put it that way. I think a lot of churches have given up, and there's no need to give up on the midweek gathering. The headwinds are real, and the things that you mentioned are true. But for most churches, and we'll talk about what do you mean most? We'll talk about that here in a moment. I think for most churches, Wednesday nights are still something that you should consider. But it could also be Thursday nights. It could, it doesn't have to be the traditional way of doing it. You've got your prayer meeting for the adults, you've got your choir practice, and then the kids have their programming, the students have their programming. I still like all that, don't get me wrong. I just don't think you have to do it that way. In fact, I think more churches could probably benefit if they changed some of that. But let's dig into it. Let's start with this. Rhythms and patterns are important to people. And it is important for your people to be in a regular rhythm of church. So everyone knows this at this point, but I'll go ahead and say it in case we have some new listeners. I'm not a big fan of the event-driven ministry where you hop from one big event to the next. I think there's a time for big events, and I think they can benefit the church. I just don't think a church should have as its strategy, its primary strategy, that this is what we do, this is how we're going to grow. I think the better way to do it is through rhythms. And what's a good way to have rhythms? Is programs. Sunday morning programs, Sunday morning worship service, Wednesday night programs. What do you see in that world? Do you agree or disagree?
100% agree with you with the rhythms thing. I think even the big events in the pastorates that I lead tend to be rhythmic, meaning, there are some churches that it feels like the leadership or the pastor, or the elders or something, they're just like sitting in a room going, let's come up with 5 things to do next month. And it's just totally new. And whatever comes along, they'll adopt that, or they'll adopt that, and they'll have these big events. Even my big events are more rhythmic, meaning this is our big women's spring event and our big men's fall event, and it happens every year about the same time, and it builds rhythm because rhythms create momentum. Events create chaos. Like it's like ping pong balls bouncing around, whereas rhythms are more like waves. They can create rhythm and build, and so you want that to happen. At the same time, I think that what you want is that very solid rhythmic pattern. I don't know anybody that disagrees on the Sunday mornings. That's a block of time there. Sunday nights can be redeemed as well. And then Wednesdays. Those are your traditional values. The other thing that I want to add to the discussion here is there used to be a time where you could go to First Baptist Church Louisville. That's my new church here. And you could go to First Baptist Church Bradenton down there. And they will have almost the exact same schedule. They'll start at the same time. They probably even call it the same thing.
Same programs.
Identical.
Presented by the Baptist Sunday School Board.
Yeah. And some of them just weren't even, it was the exact same. And while there was strength in that at a different culture in our nation's history, at some point you got to think, okay, so like you said it a minute ago, you have your senior adult, it tends to be senior adult prayer time on Wednesday night, that kind of thing. My thing was always, but does it have to be? What if we did that on Sunday nights? And one of the things I've always really kind of done as a pastor in my last 2 churches was move what's considered Wednesday night to Sunday night and what's considered Sunday night to Wednesday night. It just was a better rhythm for people, and we were able to do synergy on that kind of stuff. Because back in the day, man, you had a full day of Sunday morning, then you came back for discipleship, and it was a full slate of discipleship. Then you did prayer on Wednesday.
Training union. It was called training union in our tribe.
Yeah. So my point is, yes, I agree with the rhythms. And my question is, maybe your frustration isn't the rhythm. Don't jack with the rhythm. Maybe it's just it needs to be an upbeat instead of a downbeat. Like instead of keep the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. and do something different in those slots that really works with that age group, your setting, your community. So yeah, I agree. Rhythms, good.
So how many times? Well, before I ask that question, just a quick aside, because I'm just really curious. And this is, and we could almost do a whole episode on this, but Saturday nights. What do you think about Saturday nights?
Well, Saturday night and the moon is out. I'm going to head on over to the Twist and Shout. I think in certain cultures they can work in certain settings. We discussed that a little bit when I was in Arkansas. We were in a college town though, and college football is a big deal. And so having Saturday night service just was going to really ruin during football season. It wouldn't have been good. I don't know. I think I'm neutral on it. Obviously it works for some folks. How about you? Do you have a pushback on it at all?
Yeah, I'm generally opposed, but not for theological reasons, because it kills your staff. So if you can pull off Saturday nights with a different group of people leading it and reach a new audience, good for you. If you're a lead pastor making your Sunday morning crew also do Saturday nights, I've got some words that I would call you. I'll just keep them to myself. I think it's mean. I just think it's mean.
It's not very nice.
No, it's not. It's not very nice because you don't get a day off at all. Because we all know what that's. You could say, well, it doesn't have to be that way, sure, but we all know how these things practically work out. So I'm generally opposed to Saturday nights unless you can do them with a whole separate team, whole separate audience, whole separate team leading it. And then I'm okay with it. But that's just my 2 cents.
I don't think a lot of churches need it. I think you can go to 3 services on Sunday morning. And then I'm kind of like, then you can maybe plant a church. I don't know. Try something.
Yeah. Well, I've also seen the fading of Saturday nights. It's just not nearly as predominant as it used to be. Because I think a lot of people figured out this is very hard to do year after year after year after year. You can do it for like 6 months. It's very hard to do long term. Okay.
Yeah.
How often? We talked about rhythms, and we both agree that rhythms are important, and people need to be in a regular rhythm of discipleship. That rhythms are better than events. Events aren't bad. It's just rhythms are better than events. How often should you be in that rhythm? I'm gonna pose it. That's a weird. It's to offer a thesis. Pose it. It's just a weird. It's a weird word. I think I have that right.
Pose your thesis. Yeah,
I will. 2 times. I don't think 3 times is necessary. I don't think the old 3 to thrive model is necessary. That came out of the early 1900s, which I loved it. Don't get me wrong. Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. I'm going to say, and I think that's a bit unreasonable in today's culture. And I think 2 times is a really good rhythm for the vast majority of North American culture.
Okay, so there's this concept of 3 beautiful things are in 3. So I'm going to be open to the idea that 3 is better. Also, 3 to thrive is just much more. I mean, it's just rhythmic. I don't know how you're going to beat 2 to do it. 2 it is better. I don't know. So you need to come up with a rhyme. Here's how I answer that. I often say if you come on Sunday morning and you're invested in a worship service and in a small group and you serve somewhere, that's great. That's the base requirement. What we do on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, those are going to be supplemental. And so I want to make sure that if a family, an individual, all they do is Sunday morning, they have what they need. They have opportunity to serve, to be in community, and to worship as a church. So I want to make sure that, and then I build off of that. So I think I would probably, just initially, and I don't want anybody to shoot me on this, I think I would even go one every week is the rhythm in my mind that I would do. But yeah, I could go with any of those, honestly. I don't have a strong opinion.
Listen, if every church member in the United States came every week all the time, I'd be okay. I'd be okay with that. I would compromise. I would compromise on my convictions there, because most people aren't coming every week. Some of your best people are coming every other week, and then a lot of people are coming every third or fourth week. But yeah, I just think 2 times is a good rhythm. Sunday morning, Wednesday night is what we do at my church, and I certainly don't want to be the person that thinks that we have it all figured out. Sunday morning, Wednesday night just happens to work in our community, which gets us to the next point, which is a lot of this is community dependent. If you are in a suburban area, or if you are in an area where commuting is a way of life, which is a lot of the suburbs of large cities in the United States. I think of the Washington, D.C. area. I did a consultation for a church that was really struggling with Wednesday nights. And the reason was their people were driving an hour and a half to work, and they just literally could not get back in time. They would go. They could not get back in time. So I think that we also have to realize that Wednesday nights in particular, Sunday mornings people tend to be a little more available. Although there are plenty of people that work on Sunday mornings, but most don't. But Wednesday nights can be a very difficult time slot, especially in communities where there's a long commute.
I agree. And that's something I deal with right here. One of my previous churches I was a student minister at, in these Texas suburbs, we are just jam-packed together. It is nothing for your favorite grocery store to be in the neighboring town, and you to go 2 towns over for your home, and you work in downtown, whichever downtown you're talking about, Dallas or Fort Worth. And so that's so normal that Wednesday night commute, if you got to get out there to get the kids at school, then you got to, maybe they're practicing, there's some sort of athletics or something like that. Then you got to feed them. Then you got to get home. And the whole drive to the church, spend an hour and a half at the church, get back home, get them bathed and back to school, it becomes a big deal. Now, in rural communities where there's less of a drive, less traffic, that sort of stuff, this is what's kind of going on. Maybe the coaches are still kind of not practicing on Wednesday evenings, that sort of stuff. Then I think it's not only opportunity, you should. I think you got a great opportunity there. I will also say this, Sam, I don't know if there was a church both of us had talked to one time about pastoring. And this is a hyper-local illustration, but they had this is going to sound weird, but remember, they had an extremely strong Sunday morning brunch culture that was actually eating into their Sunday morning service. They couldn't get anybody to come to Sunday morning service. And so, because they were in a downtown urban setting, and they had more success in evening activities than they had on Sunday mornings, just because that's when you go to brunch or you go to the beach, right? It's that day to do that kind of stuff. So I imagine there are some hyper local settings that maybe Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening would be the time to have your gathering. But
yeah, you just brought up a lot of memories.
Teases out.
Of the same church. No. Nothing. By the way, for our listeners, nothing really happened with this church. A lot has happened with this church, but not with.
Oh my gosh, they need a podcast.
Not with Josh, not with me.
Yeah, we were not involved.
They called both of us, which was really weird because I was like, "Hey man, guess who's talking to me?" And you're like, "Hey man, guess who's talking to me?" And it's like,
right.
That's really, really strange.
Yeah.
But neither of us felt called at all to go there.
No.
And
didn't work out.
If you can tell now why neither of us were called.
Hey, I will just say this. On the other side of everything that happened, we were dead right. We were exactly right. We called it. We called it.
I actually, right. You know what I did for them? They asked. Now, I didn't do this. I didn't presuppose anything. They asked, well, what would you do with the bylaws? So I rewrote all of them for them, and at that point, they didn't really want to talk anymore.
Yeah,
But that's a whole nother story, right. And at some point, maybe we can tell a little more about it. But it just gets back to this world. You and I have mentioned this before. The church world is a big world, but it's also a very small world. Like in terms of who's in what circles.
Yeah, and the circles aren't nearly that competitive, or feisty as it might seem on the outside. The other thing is, so circling back to our conversation here, is you might be in a setting where you just kind of feel conviction, like you're supposed to do a Wednesday night or you're supposed to do a Sunday night, but you just can't get any traction. I would really try to step back and look at the culture of the community and go, is this a good fit for the way our people live? And that's, listen, try to stray away from the idea that, well, it's a sin then. They just need to get right with God and be here on Wednesday nights. I don't know. You're going to have a hard time finding scripture that really argues for two churches on Sunday night, or two churches on Sunday and one on Wednesday. You're going to have a much easier time arguing that from American history and circuit riding preachers than you are going to from scripture. So just step back. It may not be you or the church. It could just be the culture of the community.
Completely agree. And I agree with you on what's biblical and what's not. But I also think in our culture that it's still, even though we're talking about an origin with circuit riding and other, frontier work on the churches, I still think that there's something to the rhythm in our culture.
Yeah, it's become part of our DNA.
Yeah, I won't make a biblical argument for it. I completely agree that this is more of a practical argument. All right, so I will also say this, that 2 times rhythm that I think is really healthy doesn't have to always be on campus. You could do Sunday mornings and have your worship service, and then let's say you're in a particular church where like your facility just does not have a lot of education space, and you may have to do groups off site, and those groups may occur at any time during the week. They could occur Saturday morning, they could occur Monday morning. I mean, but you've got people going Sunday morning and then to some sort of group setting, and then they're serving through that group. I think that can be very healthy. It's much harder to do. Typically, home groups max out at about 60% of worship. Max out. It's usually 20, 30%.
Closer to 20, right.
Yeah. But on-campus groups can max out at 80%. So on-campus groups tend to do much better longer term in the church than home groups. But if it works for you, and if you don't even have the education space, then I will say the Wednesday night programming doesn't have to be what it has been traditionally. It could be that, hey, we just have lots of groups that meet throughout the week in addition to Sunday morning. And I think that's a good way to go too.
Yeah. And I'm going to circle back. I'm just going to speak to my context here, which I find that several people may relate to. In these kind of communities that I live in, similar to yours, you can talk about a neighborhood and say, so what I mean is like, yes, it is hard to go out to the school, get the kids and bring them back. But maybe there's a 7th grade group meeting in that neighborhood out there. And there's a high school group and they're at different homes. And that can negate some of that travel time, being away from the house. It's something that the kids and families in that community, in that neighborhood can do. And the idea would be you're really sending them out there to where they can reach their neighbors. That really works in contexts where you're very suburban. Now, admittedly so, I can hear some of our listeners right now going, yes, but then how do you get them on Sunday mornings to the church? That is a challenge. And you gotta really work with that, but it's a lot easier for them than then to commute to the church on Sunday morning because they're not coming from work and stuff like that. So I think that could be a strategy.
Yeah, and I'll say this about where we are. We are urban enough to where people don't get outside their bubble. It's called the West Bradenton bubble. So we're not quite suburban. We're leaning towards urban. So we are dense enough here with grid patterns everywhere that everything's so jam-packed together. People aren't traveling long distances. We don't have long commutes here because we tend to be, it's a coastal community, so we're all jammed up against the coast. You're not driving, some people commute, don't get me wrong, but a lot of people stay around this area. So that's part of the reason Wednesday nights works for us, is because we're a couple steps removed from that spread out suburban sprawl that you can see in, say, northern Dallas.
Yeah.
So it's important to know your community. That's the point. You got to know your community.
Yeah. And if you ever want to know your community, there's a Know Your Community tool at Church Answers that you can download.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. If you're wondering, like, what am I? How many people do live within 20 minutes of the church? Go to knowyourcommunity.com.
And that was just right out of our ear, right there.
We sold a lot of those last year. Sold a lot.
Oh, cool, cool, good.
Knowyourcommunity.com, and you can go check that out. All right, last thing. I think Sunday nights can make a comeback. What do you think?
I agree. I do. In the suburban context, get everything done on Sundays may be a way to approach it. I know some churches that are doing it. I think that's worth a consideration. I think Sunday mornings or Sunday nights really can. The thing that we haven't really brought up here is there's several aspects to church life. So there's the big worship gathering, there's service opportunities, there is discipleship training. But don't forget, there's also administrative stuff. A lot of our listeners are in a structure that does have maybe a board meeting or a committee meeting or something like that. And so if you kind of think of it in those terms, like, let's use one of these. Sunday night works better for our committee meetings, or, maybe it's committee meetings, but then we're also going to use that time for children's Bible drill or something. So the children are in something while the adults, a selection of the adults have something to do. But then on Wednesday nights, that could be more just childcare, so that you're not really there's no curriculum or anything. And the adults are in a disciple. So I would look at it like that. And in that light, I really do think, Sam, you're right, that Sunday nights are just underutilized in a lot of churches because, and I know what it is. What happened was all these stinking millennials became pastors, and then they were like, I don't want to do church all day long. I'm at church in the morning. We're doing multiple services. We have small groups. And then I got to come back in an hour and do another service, which I agree with you. You don't need to come back and do Sunday morning light, okay? 3 more hymns and another sermon, but use it in a strategic way that actually strengthens the church instead of just, honestly, and I don't mean this offensively, just bores the church to tears with Sunday light on Sunday night.
Here's the thing about Sunday nights. They came back. It was because of that 3 to Thrive model, and Sunday mornings were more for the church, for the body. Sunday nights were more upbeat, back in the day, contemporary music, which was gospel music. And you brought your friends to Sunday night to kind of introduce them to church. If churches did that again, I think that'd be awesome because it'd be an outreach tool. But it kind of became, we just come back and we hang out with our friends. Sermons are great. And I do believe that people can get saved on Sunday nights. And there's probably a lot of edification that occurred through sermons. But let's just be real. It was more about a core group coming back just so that they could hang out. So you don't have to prepare a whole nother sermon for that to happen. Sunday nights can still be utilized in different ways. Completely agree. We use them for committee meetings and quarterly business meetings. And we kind of create an event around each of those things.
Yeah, my first church, Sunday morning was, a handful of songs, a sermon, like everybody else's Sunday morning. Sunday night was a handful of songs, another sermon. Wednesday night was a handful of songs and another sermon. And man, it took me like a couple weeks to go, I'm not that good of a preacher. I just can't preach that many times. And so, it just kind of devolves into that. And I would bet I'd bet these AirPods right here that there are listeners right now that are like, that's what my church does. Well, nobody intentionally did that. It devolved that way. Usually. And so what you got to do is stand up and go, wait a sec, time out. Why are we doing this? Let's do this, this, and this. Now, as everything, some people decided that was, gospel truth, that it needs to happen that way, and it doesn't. But anyways, yeah. So the bottom line is, let's use Wednesday nights better. Let's use Sunday nights better. Utilize them strategically.
And here's a strategic partner to help you. If you're thinking, I could do Sunday nights, I could do Wednesday nights, you've got a great partner with Upward. Upward Sports. They can help you.
That's right.
Get these things going. Recreation ministry is, it never went away, but it's becoming more and more popular. If your church is looking to reach the community, there's a really good way to do it. You can partner with Upward Sports, and Upward becomes your bridge into the community. As the world's largest Christian youth sports organization, Upward desires to come alongside of you to help advance your mission so that you can share Christ with your community. We've done a couple interviews with them on the show, and I just love, what they told us. They said, 50% of the people involved will be church members and 50% will be from the community. And I'm like, it doesn't get any healthier than that. So if you're wondering, if you're wondering okay, what do I do on Wednesday nights? Or if I need to make a change, what do I change to? Or, hey, I think we can do Sunday nights. What do I do? Well, Upward can help you with that. And you don't need a gym. If you can find a gym anywhere in your community, they can help you use it, but you don't have to have one. You can have a field or a parking lot or whatever. I think they're one of the best ministry partners out there. They really run a great program, and what they do fits well into this idea of rhythms and patterns. And it will get your people involved, and it will get your people inviting others to church. So there you go. Yeah. Thank you, Upward, for sponsoring the show. Go to upward.org/church answers to see what they have to offer. Upward.org/church answers.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Maybe you don't have Sunday night. Sunday night could be Upward, or Wednesday night, or, whatever. Great partner for you. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that this was encouraging and edifying to you. If it was, please get on Twitter and Facebook and Threads or wherever you are, and let other people know that this is a helpful show to you. And we are appreciative that you are listening, and we will catch you next week.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org/church answers.